Recording.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to METALCONLive. I'm Judy Geller, Director of METALCON, and on behalf of my team, we are delighted to be bringing back METALCONLive today, and we're happy that you're able to join us. It's unfortunate that we won't be gathering in Las Vegas 2 weeks from now as we had hoped, but that doesn't mean we have abandoned our mission of bringing together and educating buyers, sellers, and designers of metal for construction. In fact, it's far from it. We have been working hard to develop new programming and essential training to help you thrive during these challenging business and economic times. So be sure to watch for some exciting announcements we'll be sending your way very soon. Also, mark your calendar for the next METALCONLive that'll take place on October 21st at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. The MCA will be presenting 12 ways to recover an existing sloped roof with metal, presented by Charlie Smith of McElroy Metal. And speaking of the MCA, this is a good time for me to suggest that if you are not a member, you may want to join. In addition to a discount on your METALCON booth, you'll also have access to technical reports, research data, networking with experts, and so much more. The contact details for Jeff Irwin, Director of Membership Development, are on the MCA slide. Just one quick programming note before I introduce Frank. One of today's panelists, Dr. Sarah Skidmore, unfortunately has laryngitis and isn't going to be able to join us today, but we'll be sure to invite her back another time. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Frank Staziowski, President and CEO of PSMJ Resources and co-founder of METALCON in partnership with the Metal Construction Association. Frank?
How are you, everybody? Everybody good, I hope. We're going to have 400 or 500 people on this today by the sounds of it, and I look forward to talking with you all. We've got an exciting program. We've got 3 great guests. We're going to do some point counterpoint, hear some projections, hear everything that's going on. But before we start, as I've done in the past, I'm going to start out with what I feel good about today versus what I'm a little worried about. We all know the news over the last week has been all about the president, in his case of COVID-19. So, you know, when we look at that and we see all of what's going on in the news, we're all a little more concerned, a little more heightened in our awareness of this disease. But I still feel good about a whole bunch of stuff. Number one, I feel good about the roaring 20s. I think when we get out of this, the next 8 to 10 years are going to be boom times in our industry and in our U.S. economy. There's so much pent-up demand out there right now. And more importantly, another thing I feel really good about, there's a ton of cash still out there. We know that there are billions in capital sitting around the world waiting for a place to invest. So that makes me feel really good. The other thing I still feel really good about is that our industry in general is booming compared to other industries. When we look at where we are in 2020 versus where some of the other industries that have been negatively impacted, like the airline industry, cruise industry, hotel industry, we're really in pretty good shape. Most contractors I talk to are still very busy. Of course, that depends on your sector, but especially in housing, in manufacturing, industrial kinds of things, the industry is really doing very well. We're going to have more on that when Paul Giovanni gives us some update from FMI, but I see a really booming industry out there compared to others right now. I think some stimulus is going to come. I think I feel good about that. I don't know exactly how it's going to go. I was listening to CNBC 10 minutes ago, and I'll tell you, the debate going on between the Democrats and the Republicans is just like a circus. But I do think some stuff is going to come. And when it will come, we don't know. It might most likely come after the election, which is only 3 weeks away. But I think we're going to get some more stimulus out there. Change means new business. Anytime anything changes in our economy over the last 40 years of my life, I've observed tremendous amounts of opportunity for players in the economy. So when you start to think about the amount of change that's come about as a result of the coronavirus and our living through this for the last 6 to 7 months, and the way we now work and the way we now understand Zoom meetings that we're all on, I think the change that we're undergoing is going to present new opportunities in a lot of different ways. We all know that office buildings are going to be less full than they were previous to this virus. So think about all the change that's going to happen. You're not going to knock down 40-story office buildings. So what are we going to do? We're going to change the use somehow of those buildings, and there'll be a ton of work for the people that do all of the design and retrofitting of a lot of existing facilities. I'm really optimistic, and I can't wait until October 2021 for METALCON 21. Because I'll tell you, when I look at the slides that I looked at this morning to get this background, which is one of the houses we built in Tampa a couple of years ago on site with our show, I can't wait to get back there. Tell you what, I'll make you all an offer right now. I'll buy the first round of drinks at METALCON if you all put the dates on your calendar. Because we're going to go to Tampa, Florida in October 2021. And most likely, because everyone wants to get out of their house, we're going to have a massive gathering in Tampa. So book your hotel room now. I am worried about a few things. So let me say a few things that I'm worried about, okay? I'm worried about a winter resurgence of the virus and what that'll do to our economy. I think we have a whole bunch of nervous governors and nervous mayors, and rightly so, because there's been a lot of virus around. And I'm worried that they'll start closing down segments of the economy again. So that concerns me, and it concerns me that the virus is still out there as rampant as it was in March. We've just learned more about it. I'm concerned about the impact of the election. We don't know which way it'll go. My biggest fear is that we won't know who won until December. And if we go through a month of uncertainty, it's going to affect the economy. It's going to affect decisions by business owners on what to build, what not to build, what to invest in, what not to invest in. So that level of uncertainty about our election concerns me. I'm concerned about the international trade wars that are going on and the isolationism of America and what it means for us in the metal industry. I don't know the impact of that, but I know that there's uncertainty there. And until we get through the election and figure out which of the parties is going to take over for the next 4 years, there will be uncertainty. So I'm a little worried about that. I'm concerned that there might not be stimulus, even though I said I think there will be. Suppose it doesn't happen. Well, when you listen to all of the economists in the world, if there is no stimulus, we're going to have a tough time recovering over the next 6 months to a year. I'm concerned about a couple of other things that are happening as a result of what's going on right now. One of them is the fact that with so much employment coming back in construction, and especially in design, we did a survey on our other side of our business last week, and the architects and engineers are almost back to the level of full employment they were in January of 2019. So when you think about the number of people coming back into the workforce in new jobs, there's going to be a tremendous need for training. We have all kinds of things going on out there, and all people that are working in new roles, and they're going to need training. And we have not been training people very well over the last 6 months. That's been one of the things that's been cut back. Finally, I'm concerned that once we do get back to full employment, full whatever, after this virus is gone, we're going to see an awful lot of job changes. People that are sick and tired of going through this in the company they're in will seek new jobs, and they'll start to move. So we're going to see an awful lot of employment changes. Now, the one person that I really like the most that I've listened to over the last week has been Dr. Fauci. Yesterday he said, everybody calm down, don't worry, we'll get through this, it will go away, the vaccine will come, and 2 years from now we'll be looking back at this saying, how did we ever do it? So I like listening to him. He's pretty factual. He's pretty straightforward, probably the most honest guy out there right now on TV. So I feel good about the things he's saying. All right, let's switch gears here and get into our program, and let me introduce our guests, all right? I'm going to start off with Paul Giovannoni. Now, if I say it in Italian, I think I'll get it right, Paul. If I got it wrong, you'll have to correct it. He's managing director at FMI, Fales Management Institute, headquartered in North Carolina. Paul leads all facets of FMI's building products consulting practice. And that includes market research, strategy, leadership, organizational development, and technology. Paul's focus at FMI is partnering with building product organizations to assist them in developing their strategies relating to growth, diversification, and new products. I'm not going to introduce the other two guys until Paul finishes, but we have Alan Scott, who's a fellow of the American Institute of Architects, and Tony Poqua, who's the general manager of the Metal Building Manufacturers Association, MBMA. So Paul, why don't you tell us from your perspective, you guys do research economically. I'll have you turn on your video if you can and come on the screen and tell us a little bit about what FMI is seeing and what you're seeing right now economically in the construction industry. And thank you, by the way, for coming on. We really appreciate it. That looks like a cool SUV. You're doing it from an SUV today. I love it.
I am. I'm out doing a little field research with a client right now on some new product development.
There you go.
So I am in a car right now. But when we look at the market, I share and FMI shares some of the sentiment that Frank shared up front. Contractors, the industry is still very busy, which is a great thing. And the other point to that, though, is that the industry really hasn't felt the impact of this recession, right? Not really related. It's, of course, directly tied to COVID, but it's really a recession that we're in. And the industry hasn't yet felt it. Coming out of 2019 and into this year, the industry was really at record highs in terms of its backlog, pipeline of activity. And so right now we're still burning through those projects. So right now we do feel well about the industry. You're looking at single-family residential as growing significantly right now, and a lot of folks feel really great about that. So those are all positives here in the current state. But as we look forward into 2021, that's where our concern lies. And a couple of things we see at play cause us to believe that we'll see a contraction in overall industry spending of around 10% next year, and that's 10% from this year. And a couple of those reasons why, really on the non-residential side, we have seen both from project databases as well as talking to all the contractors that we work with, that there was a gap in their project pipeline, in their pre-construction activities, from about March to about now. And that gap or that decrease in activity will impact next year in terms of project starts. So all those projects that would have been in pre-construction over the last 6 months that weren't, they won't be starting in the summer and spring of next year, which will create a contraction of the non-residential market. So our outlook for 2021 is worse than 2020 in terms of construction spending in non-residential. When we do look at the residential market, right now it is booming, and we are seeing a lot of activity. But we believe there's underlying issues with that that will come up and cause a slight correction in the market in 2021. A couple of those factors are we haven't seen the foreclosures because they haven't been allowed to happen for non-payment. So once we start seeing foreclosures happening, that will change the dynamics of the supply and demand balance. As well as we're seeing home prices creeping up. A home builder I was just talking to earlier today, because of lumber prices, has seen home costs going up about $20,000 on a first move up, second move up type home. So those costs of homes are increasing, as well as the cost of existing homes increasing. We also are starting to see in the economy that the more of the white collar professional workers who are more the traditional home buyers are starting to see a greater impact in terms of job loss. So we see all of these factors coming together, and it gives us a more of a pessimistic outlook for residential in 2021. And we believe this high that we're riding right now will slow and in some geographies come to a halt. There's going to be geographies like Texas, where I'm at today, where we don't expect to see a tremendous decline in activity and spending. But as you're looking at areas in the Northeast and some parts of the Midwest, you're going to see a significant contraction if you're not already seeing it now.
Paul, let me ask you a question about that, because there are a couple
Sure.
of points I want to make here. One, when you think about the move out of the cities, you know, I'm going to have you comment on that a little bit, because we're seeing an awful lot of people buying second homes in resort areas, getting out of the city, you know, postponing their decision to go into the city in condominiums like it was a year ago. And then secondly, the second point, if you can remember this, is the stimulus package contained, when the Democrats put it forward, an awful lot of money for municipalities and state governments, which would go towards supporting some of the construction activity by those government entities. And if that doesn't happen, I think we're going to see a contribution more toward your downturn that you're talking about. Do you agree or disagree? So 2 points, one on the move to the suburbs and one on the amount of money going to some of the government agencies that might spend it on building projects.
Sure. So on the residential side, the moving out of the cities, certainly a trend impacting, you know, when I'm talking about the Northeast and some of the Midwest declining, that's going to impact that. We're seeing, of course, people moving more towards the South Atlantic from really Virginia looping around to Texas. So we're seeing an increase there. But really, as you look at the broader market and you think about the overall population migration, while that is occurring, it's a very it's an interesting note, but it's not of substantial significance to really move the market and to counterbalance some of the other trends we're seeing. So it's important. It's going to help areas like Texas and Florida and North Carolina, but it's not going to be such a tremendous amount of migration that it will stem the tides of decline. The other point on money going to state and local government, again, I agree with that. But similar to my point on residential, the amount of which that's happening will have an impact, but not a substantial enough impact to stem the decline. When you look at the overall construction market, at least on the non-residential side, so much of that is privately funded that while the public side is helpful to see an increase there, it's not going to be enough, again, to stop the decline that we see coming in private spending. You know, it will certainly help those contractors and those manufacturers who are heavily involved in institutional work. That's actually one of the areas that we feel best about is some K-12 education and other parts of government funded projects. But again, it's not enough to stem that decline that we expect to see in the overall non-residential market.
Do you think there'll be any impact if, do you think we'll get it? We've been talking about infrastructure for 4 years, the infrastructure package. And then number two, if there is an infrastructure package, could that change any of your outlooks?
So if we do get, so the one part I didn't touch on was non-building, which would be infrastructure. Right. We do feel better about infrastructure non-building than we do about non-residential and residential. We see that declining roughly 2% over the next year or two. If we do see the infrastructure package, of course, that's going to have a tremendous amount of impact. If we even see, you know, half of it, let's say and I've heard so many different estimates of what the proposal is, but let's say it's $1 billion proposal. Even if we see half of that, it's really double what the current levels of highway and road funding is. So it would be a substantial increase. Now, I do have questions about how it will be deployed, how much shovel-ready projects are really out there, how much of it will actually go towards construction versus other facets of the industry, but it would certainly have an impact. Right now, I don't feel overly optimistic. I know we just kind of kicked the can down the road for one more year with an infrastructure extension. I certainly hope it happens, but I wouldn't necessarily bet my lunch money on it.
Okay. So what do you think if you're in the metal construction industry and you own either a manufacturing company or you own a fabricating company, any advice for these people based on your economics right now?
Well, I think the real advice I have is based more around overall market dynamics, not necessarily the economics. My advice right now is one of the key trends we're seeing in the industry is really risk aversion. And so there's a lot more risk in this marketplace than there has been previously. Supply chain risk, contractor default risk. And so one of the things that I would push forward on any manufacturer, metal industry included, is to get closer to their end customers and their end clients, get to know them better, prove that you're a better partner, that you're going to help mitigate that risk. I think this is a great time to do it, and those who do that effectively will come out of the recession in a much better position, as well as endure it much better. So that'd be one recommendation. The other is still to focus on innovation. The manufacturers that focused on innovation throughout the last recession and invested in R&D and came out with new innovative products, again, came out further ahead. So those would be my two places to really emphasize. One of the things I haven't mentioned about the overall economics, we do expect the renovation, rehabilitation side of the market to grow compared to new construction. So if there's any way to focus efforts on that, that will be a growing segment of the market, though, again, it's not enough so to affect that decline we're expecting.
Good, good. Are you able to stay on for a while and listen to some of these other comments? Because there may be questions for you coming up.
Sure am. I'll be here.
All right, good, good. Well, let's move on then to Tony Poqua, General Manager at Metal Building Manufacturers Association, MBMA. Tony's been the GM at MBMA since 2018. Previously, he was president of NSA, the largest trade organization for the sunroom and solarium industry. Hopefully, we get a lot of sun soon over the winter.
Absolutely.
He's also an experienced engineer responsible for manufacturing plants, customer service, purchasing, and engineering. And Tony, give us a perspective of the metal building manufacturers. Tell us what you're seeing out there right now in terms of where it is and what you think is going to happen. You heard Paul tell us he thinks the construction industry in general is going to be down about 2%. You can either agree with that or disagree with it. Tell me what you think you're hearing from your manufacturers right now.
Sure. Thanks, Frank. MBMA, we have a very robust proprietary statistics program. That's one of our benefits of membership. And so we collect data monthly, quarterly, annually. Every month, we check in with our members on where they're at in terms of what they're making, what they're shipping, what their orders look like. I can tell you, when you're asking about what's going on right now, Q2 of this year, no surprise, like across the economy, things really dipped off. Numbers were down 13% in dollars, 7% in tonnage in terms of shipments from our members. Really noteworthy in that quarter, new orders were down by 29%. So it's kind of what you got at there, Frank, as far as all that money being locked up and people just not wanting to spend. And we definitely saw that in Q2. That then carried over that lack of orders. So Q3 ended up flattening out, even though economic activity picked up. There wasn't as much in the pipeline, and we're seeing that now carry through the rest of the year. We do another.
Give us a perspective, Tony. How many members do you have, and how many millions of dollars do they represent in terms of metal building manufacturing?
Sure. We have 45 members now who are building system manufacturers, and we estimate that's about 95% of the industry. There are some out there who are not members, but for the most part, we are the metal building manufacturing industry, and it represents approximately $2 billion a year in sales.
Okay, good.
So, and it's about 30,000 buildings in an average year.
All right.
Yeah. So, looking forward, we have another report that we do once a month, which is our business conditions report. And this is a 3-month look ahead where we ask our members to say, what do you think is going to be coming up here? So our most recent one, looking at the fourth quarter of this year, we ask about where they are, where they think the general economy is going to be, where they think their shipments are going to be, and where you think your orders are going to be. Their forecast for fourth quarter of this year at this point are looking down. Normally there's a drop off going into the fourth quarter, even in a normal year, where especially in terms of shipments, just because the things start to slow down from a construction standpoint. But it's more so this year than it would have been in the past by roughly about 10%-ish. So, and I think a lot of that is because of that lack of projects in the pipeline because of the orders that slowed up earlier in the year.
Is there any difference in segments of the industry? You know, for instance, you can't get a warehouse in Colorado because of the cannabis industry sucking up all the warehouses. That's one segment of the industry. We know that there's a major steel plant coming online this year in Texas, and they're investing $1 billion because they believe that the warehousing industry in that part of the world will boom over the next 3 to 5 years. So any segmentation in what you're seeing?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing the same thing where, you know, warehouse and storage is probably the biggest growth area right now for our members. You know, certainly the institutional projects have really slowed up. On the warehouse and storage side, you know, you mentioned the cannabis industry. One of the areas where we're seeing a lot of activity is in repurposing of existing metal buildings, and our members often get involved with those in terms of providing guidance from how to do those conversions on buildings that they produce, but also on how to do adaptations. And one of the big areas is existing metal buildings that were warehouses or manufacturing facilities that have been shuttered out in states like Colorado, where there is a thriving cannabis industry, and they want to turn those into grow buildings. And so you can imagine that a building that was originally designed to be a factory, and suddenly now you want to grow marijuana in there, that the requirements from the air and the ventilation, the insulation, the security, all those things have to be redone, and you have to reevaluate that property. Well,
that certainly echoes my comment on change and the opportunities it creates, you know. What do you see going on beyond January? I mean, you got your fourth quarter going down. What's happening next year?
So, you know, we don't have any measure of that in terms of our statistics reporting. So I'm looking elsewhere when I'm looking at, you know, what I think might happen. One of the things, Frank, you and I talked about leading into this meeting was, you know, we talked about how do we think the election might affect that. So I'm going to hit you, Frank, with my first hot take.
Okay.
Okay. So my first hot take today, and this is from Tony. This isn't necessarily an Mbma hot take, but I honestly don't think the result of the presidential election is going to affect the economy in the near term. And by the near term, meaning 2021. As much as the two choices there's a lot of difference between them. Whichever way it goes, I don't think it's going to have a great effect on the economy, because the biggest thing affecting the economy right now is not a political item. It's a pandemic that it's not going to have a political or an economic solution. It's got to have a medical solution. So until that gets resolved, I don't think who's sitting in the White House is going to make a difference to any great effect.
I would tend to agree with that. Paul, would you agree with that also?
I think it's going to have an impact on certain areas. The one thing I think it'll at least do is to provide some level of certainty and confidence in the direction where we're headed. I think that uncertainty right now is creating hesitation. So that'll be a positive out of it. But I do think it might have an impact on some of the infrastructure legislation. So I think it'll have a little bit more of an impact than probably you guys do.
All right. Tony, back to you.
All right. Yeah, so that would be the biggest thing I would see going into next year. You know, I actually would defer to Paul in terms of the research that his group has done as far as the specifics of where they think the economy and construction specifically is going to be next year. I don't have anything that says he's wrong on that. But in terms of, how the election might affect that, I agree with Paul in terms of I think people are looking for some kind of stability. And the election, once it's done, and as you mentioned, Frank, it probably is not going to be done on the night of November the 3rd. It's probably going to stretch out for a period of time after that till we know the final result. But once that is resolved, yes, I think people will be more settled. But again, which way it's settled, I don't see that that's going to have a great effect.
All right, good. Let's bring in Alan Scott now, because he's a design architect that's dealing with some of the change going on. He's a fellow in the American Institute of Architects, senior consultant, building science solutions at Intertech. And Alan's a registered architect and sustainability expert with over 30 years of experience and a lifelong commitment to the environment. Since 2000, he's creatively applied skills as a facilitator and consultant in support of high-performance, sustainable built environment projects in North and South America, focused on decarbonization, occupant wellness, and resilience. And when you hear those words, all you can think about right now is changes to the inside of buildings for air handling systems, materials, and all kinds of other things that are going to come about as a result of the COVID situation. So, you've been listening to this, Alan. You want to comment on what either of the other two guys have said, and then tell us from your perspective what you think is going to be both good and bad about the next year?
Yeah, I think I'll jump in and start. I generally am seeing the same kind of things that we might, while we're still seeing a lot of activity now, I do think we're going to see some contraction next year, unfortunately, because of the delayed circumstances of project starts and some hesitancy about when money is going to be going into projects. So I think we will see some contraction. But I do think that there are some bright spots and opportunities in that as well. I've been listening to what a lot of commercial real estate people are talking about, and generally I think that although people are getting used to the idea of remote work and accepting that, they're also recognizing that it's not working perfectly. And so I don't think we're going to see things like next time tenants renew their leases, they're going to be contracting to 50% of the former size. I think it's going to be more like 10, 20, or 30% reduction in how much office space they think they need in those buildings. So, we'll see some changes in how people use that space, not as much about how much space they're taking up, because I think that we're going to see some opportunities for hybrid solutions with people doing some remote work and then coming to the office for collaboration. So we'll see more collaboration spaces and less of the open office bench seating, maybe perhaps larger meeting areas that are more open. So you have room to space out and better ventilation in those spaces. So we'll see more changes in the way we design those spaces, less in the gross square footage that's taken up. The other area that's going to be challenging but interesting to see where it goes is things like ground floor retail spaces. They're so vital to the vitality of urban environments. City streets depend upon the shops and restaurants being active, and a lot of those restaurants are going out of business, and it's going to take a long time before they come back. A lot of the small retail was already straining from competition with online sales, and the pandemic has been difficult for those spaces. I do think we'll see those come back because people hunger for those type of spaces, literally and figuratively, when it comes to restaurants. But it'll take a while. So I think property owners are going to be looking for unique opportunities like that. Last mile logistics for delivery of online delivery of goods might be something that takes up some of that ground floor space. So it's adapting it to new uses. And another interesting thing I'm thinking about is, well, it won't be about everybody works from home or everybody works in the office, or we see a boom in co-working spaces. Some of those ground floor retail spaces could become that support space for online work or remote workers to come in when they have to do a larger, more complex video conference, or do some printing and copying, or use other technologies. So we might see some adaptations for the hybrid remote work, in-person work.
One of the things I think of, and I'm going to agree with you here, is that when you look at the likes of Capital One and what they've done in combining banking with a coffee shop, basically, I think we're going to see an awful lot more synergistic use of spaces where there's a lot more of that going on, where you have different uses combining in a space as opposed to singular use spaces. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do. I think that's going to be part of the means to survival as we evolve into a new way of doing things or get back to some semblance of what we used to consider normal after we find medical solutions to the pandemic.
Well, let's talk about that medical solutions. You had an interesting comment yesterday relative to the use of steel versus concrete and coatings and things of that sort as it relates to being safer from the point of view of easier to clean and all kinds of things. You want to comment on that a little bit in terms of your research?
Yeah, I think that we're going to be seeing some probably interesting things in materials and material coatings for interior spaces. While I could go into a long discussion about the importance of microbes in the built environment and how they're not all bad. So I'm embracing my microbial cloud. But we do have a need to address pathogens on high-touch surfaces. And so I think that there's certain types of metals, certain types of coatings on metals that lend themselves to preventing the growth of or the hospitable environment for pathogens that then can be lead to fomite transmission of illnesses from one person to another.
You know, it's interesting when you said that. I have a good friend that's in the coatings business, and they're doing all kinds of research right now internally to redo products from that perspective to make sure that their coatings can reject some of the, the microbes and other things that are going on. And I gave them a ring yesterday to ask, and they're full bore on research to come out with a series of new products next year on metal coatings to deal with this issue. So it's fascinating.
Yes.
So there'll be segments of the industry, again, going back to my comment earlier, from a change point of view. You think there'll be segments that'll boom and segments that'll bust? What do you think will bust? I mean, what's going to go down? Do you agree with both Tony and Paul that there's going to be a setback next year in the overall construction industry?
Yeah, I agree with the setback. I'm not following things as closely as them to be able to have a crystal ball for particular segments, but I think that generally we're going to see commercial office is not going to be growing while they sort through this. I mean, right now, let's see, I heard in New York, most existing offices are only about 20% capacity in New York and around 30% in Atlanta. And it's kind of in that range everywhere. So the demand for new space is not going to be there for a while. But of course, industrial, there's probably great opportunities for expansion in industrial.
So now from an architectural point of view, you being on the professional side of this, are you booming right now? I mean, is the design side of your business booming? Have you got more demand than you've had in the past?
Well, so in my role, I'm consulting to architects as opposed to doing design directly. But I'm seeing that there's still design work going on. So the architects that I work with, most of them are busy. Some of them had small numbers of layoffs, but they're busy. But they're also seeing a potential cliff coming.
Okay.
There has been public work that I've been seeing was previously funded, and now that's coming out. So there's still some public work going on, but I agree that especially municipalities are going to be, states and municipalities are going to be challenged with their funding. And so those public and institutional projects are going to be strained. Interesting thing, a pattern I hadn't thought of before that is critical. States that are depending more on sales tax are struggling more than states that rely on income tax because the white collar workers are still working and making income and contributing to state coffers, whereas people aren't buying as much locally. So the sales tax has been down. So it's a inverse of a factor I've seen before, that sales tax states tend to do better. And so be looking to those states for more work, perhaps.
Well, kind of hard to move from Boston to Montana to take advantage of that. You know, that's a tough situation. Let me switch to technology for a second. And Tony and Paul, come back on video-wise. I want to have a little bit of a debate on this impact of technology, because you know, one of the things we talked about early on in this pandemic was that any kind of a pandemic or a crisis like this is going to create a tremendous opportunity for hundreds of new people to create technology, to create new businesses built around technology that they haven't used before. We put one example on of a metal building roofer that embraced TV with TV ads in a technological way and was getting 700 to 800 leads per week in April for metal roofs. So any comments on that? Do you think there's going to be an explosion in technological advances in the construction industry and new companies as a result of what's going on? Anybody?
Paul,
Yeah,
you got
so I'll
anything?
weigh in there, Frank.
All right.
Yeah, I do. So we have a whole practice at FMI focused just on construction technology. So it's something we've been tracking really for about the last 5 years, and something that we're seeing a lot of investment and focus on. Think things like AI-enabled takeoff software, and ways to directly integrate manufacturers to contractors to help with value engineering and to kind of stop some value engineering from happening and substitution from happening. So we're certainly seeing the increase. My personal take is that just like we saw with the last recession in 08, 09, we saw BIM really take hold after that and become almost table stakes. I think you're going to see the same thing here where new technologies, being more of a software, AI-enabled technologies, will become table stakes in the industry. So we see this as a catalyst to bring on more technology. Now, you're going to have winners and losers in that. You know, the winners are going to be the sophisticated contractors and manufacturers who have the pocketbooks to pay for it and to enable it. And just like we saw before, you're going to have the smaller market participants being at a real disadvantage to those who have it. But owners are becoming more sophisticated, and they're requiring those advancements as well. So that's driving it too. So long answer to say technology, I think this is a turning point in our industry, both from everything I've heard from people I talk to, but then I also personally hope to see that as well, that we use this as a way to do things better and be more streamlined and efficient than we have in the past.
Awesome. Tony, would you agree with that from your members' perspective? Are you seeing many of your members investing in new technologies?
You know what we're seeing, Frank, from the metal building manufacturer side, there are a lot of folks who are taking this opportunity to upgrade in terms of manufacturing processes and equipment into more modern stuff, which is generally more technologically advanced and requires fewer hands to get that work done. So that's all good. But on the other side of that, Frank, you had mentioned the marketing side of it and the opportunities there and the technology available there. We see quite a bit of that. I think with people having gotten more comfortable during this period with this type of stuff, getting together virtually and seeing how successful that can be, folks who have embraced that and are incorporating that into their businesses. As an example, our old friend, Rob Haddock, who has been on these calls in the past, and I think Rob might even be watching us here. But his company, S5, who are an Mbma member, they've done a great job of putting out all kinds of virtual learning courses. I don't think a day goes by that on my LinkedIn I don't see another S5 educational webinar come across my board, and I think they have found that to be a great way to reach out to the design and construction industry and to be an asset to them using technology as a tool. Excellent.
Alan, I'm going to switch to one other question with you because one of my areas of interest, because I have a daughter that's a dean of the international studies at Kent State University, is the whole university education business. And we haven't talked at all about that as an opportunity in the construction industry. But, you think about the amount of facilities, civil engineering, mechanical, electrical engineering, all of the things that go on at university sites across the United States, and that as a market. What do you think is going to happen to construction and design on the university school business as a result of what's going on? Any comments, Alan?
And you're referring to the education of building professionals in the university system, or?
No, education in general. I mean, you have 40,000 students at Kent State that my daughter's at, and, they've shut down and all their buildings are empty. So what's going to happen as we come out of this? Are they going to change all those buildings? Are we going to change the nature of education? How will that impact the people that are on this call? If I'm in the manufacturing business, metal manufacturing and other things, what should I think about when it comes to education? Because that's a real strong, one of the legs of our economy is education in America.
And I think, similar to the way we're probably going to see hybrids in how we do meetings as well, from conferences to work meetings. I think that this experience has shown us that there are weaknesses in our education system in K-12 and in universities, and shown some weaknesses in the financial model of colleges and universities as well. And so I think that we will see a hybridization of approaches. There isn't necessarily a substitute to some of the values of face-to-face collaboration and learning that comes out of things. So I don't think it's going to go away completely, but I think that we're going to learn from the stumbles we've had in the last year in systems and figure out how to use technology in education in a more inclusive and accessible way, so that we may have some institutions go away or scale back, but others are going to grow and thrive because they embrace a model of making education opportunities available for people who can't come to a campus, and doing that in an enriching way, but still have that bricks and mortar connection as well.
Paul, let me ask you, because you're advising product companies, and all these product companies have products, many of which are sold to facilities, whether they're educational facilities or corporate facilities or manufacturing facilities. What are you advising your clients right now relative to what they should do with products that have, previously been used, but may be changing over the next 2 or 3 years?
So diversification, of course, is something that we push as a strategy, and I think it's very relevant now. However, I think in the long term, I think over the next couple of years, of course, we're going to see a decline in construction spending in the higher education space. But I do believe, because of some of the points that Alan brought up, is that a good portion of the learning in college is not related directly to the book. It's interacting with people face to face. It's having debates. It's talking through things. And so I believe once we come to a place where we're back to a normal state, we will get back in classrooms. Now, we will have the affordability to bring people who may not have had that opportunity in the past to come to class or to be in higher education. I believe we'll be better able to serve them. But I still believe in the next couple of years, we will be back to growing in higher education, having the spending there. But I certainly believe right now diversification across multiple end segments and owner types is a very good strategy to have, as long as it's differentiated.
Okay. Many of your members, Tony, selling to the university market or not?
The biggest area where we would be selling to the universities would be more utility and storage buildings. Not so much, you don't generally see a metal building as your primary.
What about sports field houses and things like that?
Absolutely. That's thank you, Frank. That would be a big one too. And we do those on a regular basis, whether it's an indoor swimming facility, indoor tennis courts, or full size indoor football and soccer fields.
Mm-hmm. I assume most of those are going on hold right now.
There's still some of that going on.
All right. Well, let me, before we end here, I want to go to one other thing that I think is very important, and I want to get a comment from all of you on it. I made a comment in my opening remarks about billions in capital sitting on the sideline, getting ready to go. And from each of your perspectives, first, do you agree that that's out there? And secondly, do you think much of that will be invested in our industries, in our design and construction industries, or do you think it'll go elsewhere? Anybody want to kick it off? Maybe Alan, you want to start?
Well, I can't necessarily speculate about which industries they'll go to, but I agree with you that there's capital out there wanting to invest. One of the things, a longer term trend that I think we're going to start seeing more of, especially after this year, or a number of years where we've seen things like wildfires and we're down into running out of names for hurricanes and tropical storms now on the Gulf Coast, is a greater focus in resilience and investment there. Real investors are starting to make addressing climate change part of their decision on due diligence and investments in real estate in particular, coastal environments, areas prone to storms and fires. And so I think that you will see more investment being cautious about thinking about resilience, and especially climate resilience issues in the places they choose to build and how they choose to build in those locations. Fire resistance, wind resistance, being above the floodplain, other elements like that are going to be part of the decision in making real estate investments.
Okay, good. Paul, any thoughts on those billions that are out there?
There certainly are. The other part of our business I lead is our work with private equity clients,
Right.
Who are looking to invest in whether it be construction firms, architecture, engineering, or manufacturers. So doing commercial diligence work for them, research work. And they have billions in dry powder out there waiting to deploy. I do believe they see this industry as being very attractive, certain segmentations of it, because of the high level of fragmentation, as well as the antiquated way that we do business to some extent. So there's certainly opportunity for bringing technology, innovation, rolling up certain sub-segmentations of the market. So I do believe we'll get our fair share of investment into the industry, which again is another driving force towards greater sophistication for us.
Sounds good. Tony, you agree with that?
I would, and building off what Alan said, one of my gauges for activity is the calls that we get at the Mbma offices. Among the other things that we do, we are out there as a resource for the industry for information on metal buildings, and the level of call activity and the types of calls we get tells me a lot. We are getting a lot of calls about upcoming projects, and specifically from what Alan said, a lot of calls with regard to questions about resiliency and energy codes and sustainability, that the designers who are working on these buildings now, they are taking those things into account, and they want information from us on the best way to accomplish that.
Excellent. All right. Well, we want to wrap this up before the hour ends. So I want to thank all three of you for being great participants. And I'm going to turn it back to Judy for a second, unless we have some questions coming in. Judy?
We do, actually. We have a question for all panelists. And the question is, are you seeing any designers and architects adding any COVID features to new buildings, as in self-check stations at school, or packages or visitors, vestibules in residences?
I'll jump in on that. I'm not seeing so much those particular elements like that. I'm seeing more of a consideration about mechanical systems that have better ventilation and filtration in them, looking at integrating disinfection technologies into the systems, and then thinking about smart building technology, like smartphone apps that you can use to call the elevator with, so you don't have to touch the buttons. And so I think I'm seeing more of the discussion about technologies and systems than particular features like self-check stations, which I think are more of a short-term response.
Hey, Paul, let me ask you a question. I'm going to switch this a little bit here. Are you three guys flying or not flying? And Paul, you're in a car. Did you drive to Texas?
I am flying. I've been on quite a few since, yeah.
All right. How about Alan? How about Tony? Are you guys flying?
I haven't been flying up to this point, but I'm going to be flying in the next month. So,
Tony?
Same with me. Yeah, I've taken one flight since COVID started, and I do have one booked in November.
All right. Paul, you've been flying a lot or a little?
Pretty good amount. So probably 6 or 7 flights. It's getting
All
to be almost weekly now.
All right. What's your impression of the airline industry relative to filters and air handling systems and stuff? You feeling nervous, not nervous? How do you feel about it?
Well, this is not an endorsement, but it's going to sound like one. So I'm a Delta loyalist. I almost always fly Delta, and so I feel great flying Delta. Love that they have the middle seats blocked in first class, one person per 2 seats. So that's wonderful. I have flown in other airlines, which I won't mention, but it was not the same as the one I flew down here, and it was a completely packed flight, which I'm not overly uncomfortable about this overall situation, but I was even a little uncomfortable in that situation. So overall, I'd say depending on where you're traveling to and the method, it can be very comfortable and actually pleasurable. I've enjoyed flying because there are less people and nobody wants to talk to you, which being an introvert is enjoyable. But there are situations which are a little tight and would normally be uncomfortable, and they're a little more so now. So.
All right. Well,
I'll just add. I was going to just add
Howard.
quickly that it's reassuring to me that the ventilation filtration in airplanes is a lot better than it is in buildings. So actually, it's a pretty safe place to be as long as the people immediately around you are wearing masks and not sneezing on you.
There you go. There you go. Well, here's my final prediction, and then I'll turn it back over to Judy. First, thank you all again for being our panelists today. Great session. A lot of people stayed right on. Not many dropped off at all, which is an indication of the interest in what you're saying. So I want to thank you all for being part of this and hope you'll continue to join with us in future sessions as we come online with it. But here's my final prediction. And when I think about the airline industry, I think about the fact that as soon as people are comfortable with flying, we'll be back to somewhat normal. I don't think we're going to be back to normal until you can say to anybody, let's take a trip to Florida, to Disney World. Oh yeah, let's go. How about next weekend? And you hop on a plane and go. As soon as the general public is feeling comfortable with flying again, this whole virus thing will get behind us. And then we'll start to see what normal means at that point in time. All right, that's my final prediction. Judy, you put the next slide up. Take over. It's all yours. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, so I just want to also thank our panelists for joining us today. I think that you shared a great deal of important information with our community, and we all appreciate that. You see that we've got the next METALCONLive scheduled for October 21st. Spread the word. We hope that you can make it. And by the way, if there are topics that you'd like us to cover, please email us. Shoot us some ideas at info@metalcon.com. And as I said before, stay tuned. There's more to come. And thanks again for joining us.
One last comment. Remember, this was all recorded. So if you want a recording of this, just email Judy or Kaylin and they'll get you a recording of this.
Yeah, we'll be sending it out to everybody who registered as well. So
Thank you all. Have a great day.
thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.